Good afternoon. Welcome to your Hindu editorial. Welcome to your editorial RC session. As you know, this is a session of RCs through editorials. Every week we have one one editorial we choose and then read it, summarize it, and answer questions. This will help you with your reading comprehension section of any aptitude test, especially CAT. But as I said, this will improve your reading comprehension skills because typically an editorial can be on any subject. So your reading is becoming eclectic. You're reading from various sources. One day, today, for example, it is international relations. The other day we read about a law. Another day we'll read about something else. So your reading can become very, your reading sources, your reading, the topics will be very eclectic. Second, the language used in editorials is obviously superior to any other article. So that is another area where you learn to read something written in good language. You come across a little more difficult words and expressions. So all in all, it's a good way to ace RC. I hope all of you are with me. Let me know with a thumbs up if you can see me and hear me clearly, and then we'll start the session. All right. Just let me know if you can see me and hear me clearly. Also, for me to check if my chat function is working well or not. Last time I could not see your answers. On a couple of sessions, I could not see your answers. So just type in something there, a hi or a hello or a good evening or a good afternoon. It's afternoon, not evening. I have a bad throat. That doesn't mean my head shouldn't function well. My nose and head are blocked. All right. So, what are we going to do today? We're going to read an editorial which appeared in the Hindu. Was it yesterday or maybe today? It is on international relations. It's about 449 words long, which is exactly the number we want because CAT gives us passages which are about 500 words long. All right, we'll follow the same protocol as usual. I'll give you about a minute to read each slide, and then after you finish reading the slide, I'll summarize it for you. Start reading now. Done reading. The moment you are done reading, please type in the chat box that you are done. And that, like I said, I haven't seen any confirmation that you can see. I am unable to see the chat, or am I able to see the chat? I'm not able to see any reactions. Let's see. All right, done reading. Shall we move to the next section? Next slide. Yes. Okay, the next slide. Again a minute, though you can read it in 30 seconds. 45. All right. So let's go back and summarize the passage. Whenever you're given a passage, first thing, read and summarize what are the key points. I'll read it and then we will look at the key points. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Moscow visit was billed as his first standalone visit during this tenure. Okay, this was the first standalone visit of the Prime Minister, with officials laying stress on the purely bilateral framework. It was not clubbed with anything else, just bilateral relations between India and Russia. However, while this visit had strong bilateral components, its impact has been felt globally with unprecedented criticism from Kiev and Washington on its timings and optics. Though it is bilateral, the impact has been felt globally and India has been criticized. In diplomatic relations, in international relations, the capital of a country is named to show the country's criticism because the main diplomatic corps or the government is in the capital. So Kiev and Washington are both have both criticized uh, eh, the prime minister's visit to Moscow. On the bilateral front, the visit is first to Russia since 2019, and the first annual summit in 3 years resulted in a number of outcomes. If you really look at it from a bilateral perspective, India, Russia only. This was the Indian Prime Minister's first visit to Russia since 2019. It was the first annual summit meet between the two leaders in 3 years, and there was a lot of outcomes. What were the outcomes? What were the results? There was a reaffirmation of India Russia ties as well as Modi's obvious personal rapport with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Mr. Modi also received Russia's highest civilian award. He praised Mr. Putin's effort to strengthen bilateral ties that has appeared to be flagging. Flagging means losing in energy, losing in importance, decreasing, given the war in Ukraine and the growing Russia China ties. So, why are India China ties, India Russia ties not as strong? Why are they flagging? Why are they decreasing? According to the author, it's because the war in Ukraine, also because Russia's uh, growing ties with China, and everyone knows that India and China are not necessarily on good relations. In formal talks, the leaders focus on bettering the economic and trade relationships, which has been a neglected part of the largely government to government engagements. It announced a bilateral trade target of $100 billion by 2030, which should easily be met given India's massive increase in oil imports from Russia. So they have a trade target of $100 billion. And the editor says they can easily meet it because India has been importing oil from Russia, especially discounted due to Western sanctions. So Western countries have sanctions against Russia because of the Ukraine war, and they're not taking oil from Russia. But India has increased its imports of oil from Russia, and Russia is offering it to India at a discounted rate. A lot of supplies there. We've got plenty of oil. India needs oil, so Russia is giving it to it at a discounted rate. Mr. Modi also won an assurance from Mr. Putin that Indian recruits enlisted in the Russian army will be allowed to return to India. This was an issue. It has been part of news reports, and lot of editorials and comments. Unlike in the past, the visit lacked any announcement of military purchases that have been part of the mainstay of China. Whenever we talk of India Russia ties, there is a military element, there's a defense element to it, but this time there was no such announcement on military purchases, partially due to Russia's delays in supplies in deals already announced after the invasion of Ukraine. Russia is too busy fighting the war in Ukraine, so it delayed supply of whatever deals it had with India, even those were delayed, and also to avoid international censure. One is Russia's inability to supply arms. Second, India didn't want international criticism. All right. Mr. Modi's statement that there was no solution on the battlefield to the conflict, as well as his decision to travel further to Vienna, were seen as attempts to balance the trip, his first since the conflict began. Mr. Modi also said, listen, there is no solution to the battlefield. The war has to end. And second, he decided to travel to Vienna to balance any criticism about his visit to Russia. The first one talked about India, Modi's visit to Moscow, trade announcements that were made, no military announcement, and also Modi's statement at the end of the visit that there is no solution on the battlefield, and also his decision to visit Vienna. All right. In the second paragraph, in an increasingly polarized world, see, poles are ends of anything. So the world seems to be increasingly divided, split. This was easier said than done, especially as Modi's visit happened even as Ukraine was hit by a devastating missile strike. Just when Modi visited Moscow, Ukraine had another experienced another devastating missile attack from Russia. And so Modi's statement was easier said than done. It was not really very practical. There was no because Russia was not stopping. There were also NATO Western Alliance leaders and Ukraine President Zelensky converging in Washington for a summit that was aimed, albeit means although, unsuccessfully at showing Russia's isolation. At the same time that Modi visited Russia, one thing happened. Ukraine was hit. There was a missile attack on Ukraine again by Russia, so the conflict ending didn't look likely. Second, there was a meeting of NATO and Western countries and Zelensky to try to isolate Russia, but that was not successful. It is another matter that the stance reeks of hypocrisy. The editor accuses countries trying to isolate Russia of hypocrisy. What is the hypocrisy? What is the double standards that the author is accusing them of? As the NATO countries have failed to show similar concerns over the killing of innocents in Gaza due to Israel's relentless bombardment. Now, if war is wrong for everybody. If missile attacks are wrong, it's wrong for everybody. You can't criticize Russia for doing it and try to isolate Russia, have sanctions against it, criticize it, and keep quiet where Israel is doing the same thing. This is the author's view. So he says, therefore, all this NATO Western alliance talk is reeking, it's stinking of hypocrisy. It shows their hypocrisy, it shows their double standards. The US State Department and Ukraine have been openly critical of Modi's visit, and New Delhi's task will be to limit the damage in ties with the US. So, this visit has had one important repercussion. What is that? United States has been very critical. Both United States and Ukraine have been very critical of India's policy of Modi's visit to uh, Moscow. In the long term, this is the editor's final word. In the long term, India will have to assert its interests and convince the West that it is futile, it is useless to force India to choose or push a country known for its independent stance. You can't force us to choose. You can't force us to take a side because we've always been independent. We've never been a camp follower. And even in this conflict, India has to make it clear that it will not belong to any camp. All right? Did you all understand? Oh, clear? Give me some chat. I have to see if this chat is working or not. Or maybe we're there and I can't see your comments, which would be a tragedy. All right. What is the first question? What is the central argument of the author in the passage? What is the author saying in the passage? What is his main argument? Is it A, B, C, or D? To criticize India's foreign policy decisions and its handling and handling of India's relationships with Russia and the West. Is this the author's argument? Is he criticizing India's foreign policy decision, and is he criticizing India's relationship with Russia and the West? To highlight the economic benefits India stands to gain from deepening its ties with Russia, especially in energy and trade? Is he saying that yes, India needs to come closer to Russia because then it will be in terms of energy and trade? Is that the author's central focus? Is it C, to discuss the Prime Minister's recent visit to Moscow and its implications for India's foreign policy amid global geopolitical tensions? Or is it to emphasize international criticism and diplomatic fallout of the Prime Minister's visit to Moscow? Now, is the author, you have to just first decide what is the author's tone. Is he criticizing? Is he focusing on one aspect? Is he discussing in general in an objective kind of way? Or is he emphasizing that criticism has been there? If you read the passage, first part, he said this was India has termed it as a standalone visit on bilateral ties only, but it has been criticized by US and Ukraine for this. Second, it talks about what exactly happened during this. There were some agreements on trade, and no military agreements at all. And next, the author comments that the visit happened at a very awkward time because the timing of the visit was not very clear. It happened when there was a missile attack. It happened when all these Western countries and NATO countries were coming together trying to isolate Russia. And then the author comments that these countries do not are very hypocritical when they are criticizing India, they're criticizing Russia, and they're quiet with what Israel's bombardment. And then in the end, he says India has to assert its interest. It has to choose its national interest first. What will benefit it? And it has to convince the West that look, you cannot force me to join any camp. I'm an independent entity. I make my own decisions. I will not be either in the Western camp or in the Russian camp. That's what the author is saying. So he is not criticizing, right? He is mentioning what happened during the trip, but he is not highlighting the economic benefits of better ties with Russia. He rather is discussing the prime minister's visits and its implications. So the correct answer is option C. Good. Question 2. Refer to the following lines in the passage. What is the answer to question 2? Please key in your answers. Then I know. And if you have any doubts, let me know. Refer to the following lines. In an increasingly polarized world, this was easier said and done. Whenever you're given any line from the passage, even if you remember it, please go back to the passage because the question is asking, what does the this mean? Correct? So here, Mr. Modi's statement that there was no solution on the battlefield to the conflict, as well as his decision to travel further to Vienna, were seen as attempts to balance the trip, right? His statement, he was made a statement that there is no solution on the battlefield. War is not the answer. War is not the solution to anything. That was his statement against the war in Ukraine. And then he also tried to balance his trip by not just going, initially, it was only to Moscow, but then he further went to Vienna as well, right? So, in an increasingly polarized world, this was easier said than done. So, what does the this refer to? That's what the question is asking. What does the this refer to? Okay. The this refers to the bilateral outcomes achieved. Does it refer to the bilateral outcomes achieved uh, during Modi's visit to Russia? Give me your answers. Is it A, B, C, or D? Does it refer to the trade discussions between Modi and Putin? Does it refer to the personal rapport between Modi and Putin? Or it refers to the Prime Minister's attempt to balance his visit? Which one does the this refer to? A, B, C, or D? Since the statement this comes immediately after Modi's statement and his visit to Vienna were seen as attempts to balance the visit, obviously the this refers to attempts to balance. That attempts to balance the India's trip is difficult. So, because it's an increasingly polarized world, the world is divided, split, and if you are seen going to Russia, then people who don't like Russia, like the United States, NATO, and its allies, will criticize you. Modi tried to balance, tried to pacify the other side by his statement and by going to Vienna, but it was easier said than done. You can say he's attempting to do it, but it's more difficult to actually achieve it. So this refers to his attempts to balance his visit by going to Vienna and by making a statement against war. All right. So the correct answer is option D. Clear? All right. Question 3. Which of the following which of the conclusion logically follows from the passage? So, when you are asked a conclusion, to derive a conclusion from the entire passage, that conclusion has to align with the main point of the passage. So, just quickly remember, go through what are the main points. Modi visited Moscow. It was called a bilateral visit. There was some trade agreement signed, no military agreement signed. Modi enjoys a personal rapport with the Russian president. His visit was criticized by the West, by NATO countries, by the United States. The timing of his visit was rather unfortunate. It came just the same time as there was a missile attack, and also the same time that these countries had trying to meet to isolate Russia. The end, the author says India must assert its sovereignty, assert its independence, and convince the West that it's independent, it is a friend of both sides and doesn't belong to any one side. Correct? Now, which one would go with the options given? With Aligned with the entire passage. The PM's visit to Moscow was significant for emphasizing bilateral ties with Russia amidst global criticism and geopolitical tensions. Looks like a good answer. Some of you have answered A. Let's look at B, C, and D. The primary focus of the PM's visit was to announce new military purchases. If you remember, the passage said there were no new military purchases, there were no announcements on military purchases, and the author says there could be two reasons for this. So we know there were no. The Prime Minister's visit to Moscow received widespread international praise. No, it got a lot of criticism. The main outcome was the signing of a new security pact. Therefore, because the other three options are way out and really incorrect, A anyway is the correct answer, aligns with the main point of the passage. Excellent. Oh, you got that right. All right, question 4. Refer to the following lines of the passage. It is another matter. Let me put this in capital letters. Okay. It is another matter that the stance reeks of hypocrisy, as the NATO countries have failed to show similar concerns over the killing of innocents in Gaza due to Israel's relentless bombardment. What is the author's tone in this sentence? When you have to answer any question on tone, first find out the subject is referring to what, the sentence is referring to whom. The sentence is referring to a stance. Whose stance? NATO countries. Correct? So, what is the author saying about the NATO countries? This is the subject that the author is talking about. This is the subject of the sentence. The stance of the NATO countries is different for Russia, different for Israel, and this reeks of hypocrisy. It stinks of double standards. So, what is the author's tone? He is obviously criticizing the stance. He is obviously saying, you're doing that, that's hypocritical of you. That's showing your double standards. You have one set of rules for Israel, one set of rules for Russia. That's not right. So, what is the author's tone? Indifferent and neutral, sympathetic and understanding, critical and accusatory, or sardonic and satirical. He is not indifferent because he is saying you are a hypocrite for taking the stand. He's calling NATO countries hypocritical. Hypocritical means having double standards, saying one thing, doing one thing, having one set of rules for yourself, having one set of rules for others. The rules that apply to Russia should also apply to any other country, especially Israel. But where Israel was concerned, he is saying NATO countries have kept quiet. But Russia, they are criticizing. So the author says that is wrong. So indifferent and neutral is incorrect because he has expressed an opinion. He is not sympathetic and understanding. His tone, we are talking of his tone towards NATO countries and their stance. He's calling it hypocritical, so he's not sympathetic and understanding. He is critical and accusatory, so C is the correct answer. Sardonic means mocking, disdainful. Satirical means sarcastic, which is not the correct answer. Okay, so the correct answer is C. Excellent. All right, let's look at the next question. Which word in the passage indicates that the Russian president and the Indian prime minister get along very well? There is a word in the passage. So let's look at what are the words. Is it strong? Is it bilateral? Is it rapport? Or is it assurance? Which word? He says that the Russian president and Indian prime minister get along very well. We get that impression when we read the passage. Which word here indicates, which adjective or word used by the author? The strong, actually, it's a noun which shows the relationship that they have. What is the word? One second. Let me just give me a second. What is the answer? You please give me. Again, I can't see. Huh. So the personal bond, right? He says. So he uses the word the personal rapport, right? So it's not an adjective, the personal bonding that he enjoys. So that word shows that they get along. When two people get along very well, you say they have a strong personal rapport. All right. Bilateral is two countries, between two people, two sides. All right. Anything involves lateral means sides, bilateral involving two sides. Okay. But the exact word he says that Putin and Modi enjoy a personal rapport. Rapport means connection or bonding. So the correct answer is C. Okay, all words have a positive connotation, but the correct answer is C. All right. Okay. Next. Now, in the passage, because it's an editorial, the author has described it beautifully. He said, while the visit had strong bilateral components, its impact has been felt globally. It's only, people didn't say it's only between India and Russia. Indian prime minister has gone to Russia, he's met the Russian president. What's the big deal? They didn't say that because its impact was felt globally with unprecedented. Unprecedented means it didn't have any precedent before. There was no example that you can cite before it. Unprecedented, very high level of criticism from Ukraine, Kiev, and from USA, Washington, on its timing and optics. So the question is asking, what is the meaning of optics here? He said the visit has got unprecedented criticism from Russia, from Ukraine and from USA on its timing and optics. What does optics mean here? Look at the four options. Optics refers to timing. I told you the timing turned out just during Russia's increased attack, bombardment, missile attack on Ukraine. And it also happened the same time that the others, allies of Ukraine, got together to try to isolate Russia. And that time, the Indian Prime Minister was in Russia. So the timing was not correct. Second is for its optics. So what does that mean? The timing and optics were bad, and it was criticized for that. Does optics refer to visual aids and presentations, scientific instruments and technologies discussed, economic strategies, or how the visit was perceived by others? How was it seen by others? Especially in terms of symbolism. When you're going visiting a country and there's a missile attack against a third country, how will this visit be viewed? Oh, there's an attack and you're sitting in that country, that means you also are part of that. Those are the things that come to your mind, right? So what does optics, what is the meaning of optics here? Obviously, we're not talking, optics can refer to visual aids, that's one of the meanings, but not in the context in which it is used. Scientific instruments, not in the context, definitely not economic strategies. It is about how it was perceived, how it was seen, how this visit was seen in terms of all this. India is visiting, the Indian PM is visiting Russia. Yes, war, there is a missile attack. So it was viewed as something that helped Russia's public image. Rush- it showed that India is supporting Russia. So it was symbolic in many ways. Some could have seen it as symbolic of India's support of Russia. Sorry about that. Let me shut that. All right. So the correct answer is A, B, C, or D. How it was, optics is a substitute for perception. How it was seen by others. How it was perceived by others. Clear? All of you clear? Good. All right. So correct answer is D. Question 7. The word build, as used in the passage, is a dash. What part of speech is it? And what does it mean? Fortunately for us, the word is used in the first line itself, so we don't have to go very far. Okay? The Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Moscow visit was billed as his first standalone visit during this tenure. His first standalone visit during this tenure. It was billed as his first standalone visit during this tenure. So, what part of speech has it been used as? And what does it mean? Is it an adjective and does it mean importance? Is it a verb which means described? Is it a noun and means agenda? Or is it a noun and means amount? A, B, C, or D? Quickly key in your answers, guys. The faster you key in, the better. It was, this visit was built. The Ambani wedding, Anant Ambani's wedding, is billed as the greatest wedding of this century, the greatest wedding in the wedding spectacle of the century. So, what does build mean and what part of speech is it? Is it A, B, C, or D? Give me the question number because I'm only seeing A, B, C, or D and I don't know which question you're referring to, right? So, give me the question number. This is question number 7. Key in your answer again and tell me, is build used as an adjective, verb, noun, or noun, and does it what does it mean? I give you another example. The Ambani wedding is billed, is described as the greatest wedding. So Modi's visit is billed as the first standalone, has been described as, mentioned as. Yes, perfect. So it's a verb. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Now, I've taken a sentence from the passage. All right, I've removed the prepositions and articles. All right, and I hope you don't remember the sentence, but you know the grammar behind it to fill in the blanks correctly. All right, so what should be there? There was dash reaffirmation, dash India Russia ties, as well as Modi's obvious personal rapport, dash Russian President Vladimir Putin. What is it saying? All the words for the first option say A, so there is no problem with that, because you can need not. Uh, the visit was a reaffirmation, or both sides, there was reaffirmation between both sides, then you don't have to use a. So that's why I said. So what is the answer for 8? A in for, A on from, A off for, or with. What's the answer? A, B, C, or D? What's the correct answer for 8? We know this is a, there is no doubt about this. In India Russia ties or of India Russia ties, and personal rapport from, for, or with. What should you say? Uh, in reaffirmation of our ties as well as your rapport with somebody. All right, so the correct answer is D. All right, look at the passage again and then you will know. You share a personal rapport with somebody. That's the correct preposition. That's what I wanted you to know. All right, I hope you enjoyed that little bit of information on India Russia relations, and also uh, learned a little bit about summarizing and how to answer questions. I'll see you again next Saturday with another editorial which we shall analyze. This time with maybe one more, um, some slightly more difficult question. Here, the key is for you to summarize correctly, get the main point before we move on to other questions. All right. Okay. See you all very soon. Until then, bye bye.